A fierce gust of wind howls through the air as the intense scene abruptly begins. Panting heavily, she desperately wonders if escaping this far guarantees her safety. Anxious thoughts plague her mind as she prays no one has figured out her true identity. Suddenly, an ominous voice cuts through the tension, declaring that she has been found. Shock paralyzes her as she stares at her pursuer, utterly bewildered by his sudden appearance. Furious, he accuses her of ruining everything for their beloved team by associating with that guy. Consumed by betrayal, he demands to know how she could turn her back on everything they built. With cold disdain, he sneers and orders her to just hurry up and lose already. A desperate cry for the boss shatters the heavy, oppressive atmosphere. A blinding clash of force erupts, shaking the very ground beneath them. Slowly regaining consciousness, a disoriented girl wakes up in a completely unfamiliar place. Panic sets in as she realizes her memories have completely vanished into a thick fog. A sudden, sharp pain jolts through her battered body, forcing a pained gasp from her lips. Looking down in bewilderment, she wonders why she is tightly wrapped in medical bandages. Staring at the heavy wrappings, she struggles to comprehend the sheer severity of her hidden wounds. Catching a glimpse of her reflection, she recoils in shock at the unfamiliar face staring back. Suddenly, a jarring jolt of recognition strikes her as she realizes she actually knows this mysterious face. Horrified, she identifies herself as Dahlia Agnes, a prominent character from her friend Kaori's favorite Otome game. A chilling wave of dread washes over her as she remembers Dahlia Agnes is infamous as the game's tragic villainess. Dark memories flood her mind of Dahlia being starved, whipped, and relentlessly tormented by her cruel stepmother and half-sister, Nanazelia. She tragically recalls that Dahlia's agonizing life began the exact moment her mother died in childbirth. A crushing sense of isolation takes hold as she realizes neither Dahlia's father nor the maids ever tried to save her. Touching her wounds, she grimly remembers this injury resulted from a brutal whipping after her half-sister framed her. Starved for familial love, the desperate Dahlia ultimately lost her way and morphed into the cruel villainess who opposed the heroine. Broken by endless punishments and a desperate plea for love, the original Dahlia tragically took her final breath. Pure panic sets in as the terrifying reality solidifies that she has actually reincarnated as the doomed Dahlia. Overwhelmed with empathy, she marvels at how the heavily bullied girl survived so long before inevitably meeting a gruesome end. Pushing through the utter confusion, a fiery spark of determination ignites within her awakened soul. With blazing resolve, she vows to shatter the game's tragic plotline and forge a happy ending for Dahlia. Her mind races with strategies as she desperately tries to calculate the absolute perfect path to this new conclusion. She pinpoints the exact catalyst of Dahlia's doom, becoming the fiancé candidate for the first prince, Heterogrady. Analyzing the narrative, she deduces that the easiest survival route requires entirely dodging the dangerous fiancé selection. A tense silence fills the room as she mentally prepares for the monumental struggle ahead. Deep in thought, she searches her inherited memories to uncover what the original Dahlia truly desired from life. A brilliant memory surfaces of a flashing blade, revealing that Dahlia always harbored a secret, cool fascination with wielding a sword. Recalling the fierce intensity of her past, she vividly remembers the absolute thrill of fighting like a true warrior. Gripping her makeshift weapon, she visualizes a powerful swordsman because she has always desperately wanted to be strong. Pausing her intense workout, she deeply contemplates the true meaning of strength in this unforgiving fantasy world. Nostalgia floods her mind as she remembers working tirelessly to grow her unstoppable girl gang in her previous life. A brilliant realization strikes her that she can actually make Kaori's dream come true alongside Dahlia's ambitions in this new reality. Excitement blazes in her eyes as she remembers the royal knights famously accept absolutely anyone regardless of their social status. Clenching her fists with newfound determination, she fully commits her soul to walking this dangerous, uncharted path. With burning resolve, she vows to shatter her tragic destiny and rise to the absolute pinnacle of this world as a legendary knight. Grounding herself in harsh reality, she acknowledges the immediate, desperate need to heal her broken body and build her failing stamina. Retreating to the safety of her room, she secretly begins an intense regimen of strength training while her deep wounds slowly recover. Exhausted from the grueling physical exertion, a fierce, agonizing hunger suddenly gnaws at her painfully empty stomach. She bitterly realizes she cannot rely on the treacherous household maids who are completely loyal to her cruel stepmother. Staring at her utterly pathetic rations, she resiliently accepts that staying holed up and training is her only viable survival strategy. Driven by a desperate need to empower her scrawny body to enact vengeance, she boldly sneaks out to scavenge the dark kitchen. Panic strikes her heart like lightning as a sudden, sharp voice violently shatters the silence of her stealthy kitchen raid. Frozen in sheer terror, she intensely braces herself for the inevitable, brutal punishment from her cruel captors. The imposing, shadowy figure of a man abruptly steps into the dim light of the cold kitchen. Complete confusion washes over her tense features as the intimidating man inexplicably stops dead in his tracks. Missing her vital chance to flee, she fiercely clenches her fists and prepares to violently punch her way out of the confrontation. Astonishment completely overrides her panic as she finally recognizes the towering man as the estate's stoic head butler. To her utter surprise, the head butler smoothly breaks the heavy tension by calmly asking if everything is all right. Still paralyzed by lingering fear, she mentally prepares for the absolute worst possible outcome of this disastrous encounter. The head butler swiftly dismisses the awkward tension, leaving her completely bewildered by his surprisingly casual demeanor. He smoothly covers for her forbidden presence by pretending he just came down for a simple late-night drink after finishing his duties. The heavy kitchen door clicks shut with a resounding thud, securing their absolute privacy in the quiet, dimly lit room. Confirming her identity as the disgraced Lady Dahlia, he respectfully asks her to wait just a single moment. Approaching her with gentle care, he quietly offers her a secretly prepared, generous bundle of fresh food. Bowing deeply in solemn reverence, he sincerely apologizes that this meager offering is all he can provide to her late mother's beloved daughter. Touched by his incredibly unexpected kindness, she gratefully accepts the food while deeply wondering about his secret connection to her birth mother. A warm, radiant spark of hope ignites in her chest as she realizes Dahlia actually has one true, loyal ally in this wretched house. Returning to the shadows of her gloomy room, she soberly reminds herself that she cannot possibly rely on such incredible luck every single day. Staring blankly at her empty table the following day, she anxiously wonders how she will physically survive the ongoing, deliberate starvation. Utter shock violently grips her senses as she suddenly spots a massive, incredible feast miraculously waiting for her. She stares in pure disbelief at the heaping plates of delicious food that have inexplicably appeared in her previously barren room. Devouring the incredibly delicious meal, she happily suspects the kind head butler secretly orchestrated this wonderful, life-saving feast. Anxiously pondering her future, she worries about securing a sword and passing the grueling night trial in time. She breathes a sigh of relief, thankful that her daily food situation is finally handled. Joyful cheers echo as her cruel stepmother and half-sister excitedly prepare for a lavish trip to the capital. Dressed in extravagant gowns, the wicked duo flaunts their wealth before their impending departure. Hiding in the shadows, Dahlia glares at her despised stepmother and Nana Zelia as they plan their trip. Nana Zelia gleefully anticipates a fun, exclusive shopping spree with just her mother in the bustling capital. Overhearing their plans, a thrilling realization strikes Dahlia that only the two of them are leaving the estate. Exploding with joy, she gleefully celebrates the absolute freedom of having the oppressive house entirely to herself. Disguised cleverly as a young boy, Dahlia confidently navigates the densely packed, vibrant streets of the capital. Scanning the bustling market, her determined eyes finally lock onto a rugged, well-stocked weapon shop. The gruff shopkeeper spots her instantly, demanding to know why a mere kid is wandering his shop without parents. Undeterred by his intimidating presence, she boldly steps right up to the heavy wooden counter. Bursting with fiery resolve, she loudly declares her intention to buy a sword and train to become a true knight. Suddenly realizing her massive outburst, she frantically waves her hands and apologizes for shouting so loudly. Regaining her composure, she confidently requests a lightweight yet lethally sharp blade capable of taking down any opponent. Intrigued by her fierce spirit, the seasoned shopkeeper smiles and presents a magnificent, specialized blade for her inspection. Her eyes widen in absolute awe as she gazes upon the perfectly crafted, gleaming steel of the unsheathed weapon. Praising its razor-sharp yet lightweight build, the impressed shopkeeper generously offers her a special discount on the perfect blade. Thrilled beyond words, she eagerly accepts the incredible weapon and bows in deep gratitude. With a warm grin, the supportive shopkeeper waves goodbye and encourages her to become a real knight. Clutching her new weapon triumphantly, she decides to explore the colorful market stalls with her remaining free time. Basking in the warm sunlight, She happily marvels at having this entire, glorious day completely to herself. Drawn to a vibrant merchant stall, she joyfully purchases a delicate, beautifully crafted hairpin. Holding the sparkling accessory in her hands, she smiles softly, amazed that she actually bought it for herself. She admires the elegant design, her heart fluttering with a gentle, long-suppressed joy. With a bright, genuine smile, she carefully pins the beautiful accessory into her hair. Staring at her reflection, she melancholically reflects that she never would have dared buy something so cute in her past life. Haunted by expectations, she recalls always playing the tough, unshakable role that everyone demanded of her. Flashbacks surface of her past life as the incredibly strong, widely feared head of a fierce girl gang. Beneath that terrifying exterior, she secretly adored sweet things, shoujo manga, and romantic otome games. She remembers fighting exhaustingly hard every single day to keep her soft, girly side hidden from the ruthless world. However, a vivid memory strikes her of the one specific person who accidentally discovered her deepest secret. That person was Miyabi, a terrifying, brutal biker gang leader who deceptively looked like a perfect model student. She vividly recalls the fateful night she found his battered, collapsed body bleeding on the side of the road. Though she only intended to nurse him until he healed, the relentless Miyabi took a massive liking to her and refused to leave her alone. She warmly reflects that despite his terrifying reputation, Miyabi actually kept her girly secret completely hidden. A wave of bittersweet nostalgia washes over her as she vividly recalls those precious past memories. Chuckling to herself, she wonders if the supposedly ice-cold gang leader completely freaked out when she abruptly died. Suddenly, a jarring memory strikes her mind like a bolt of lightning. Gazing around, she realizes the brutal incident with Miyabi happened in a dark alley exactly like this one. Peering into the shadowy depths of the alley, a chilling sense of déjà vu grips her soul. Blinking in sheer disbelief, she fiercely questions if her eyes are playing cruel tricks on her. A badly beaten figure lies motionless on the cold cobblestone, mirroring her most haunting memories. Springing into immediate action, she frantically screams out to the collapsed stranger. Dread pools in her stomach as the battered body offers absolutely zero response to her desperate cries. Screaming for a doctor, she desperately begs the dying stranger to just hang on a little longer. Adrenaline surges through her veins as she hastily secures emergency medical treatment for the bleeding man. The grim doctor solemnly reveals that a mere few minutes of delay would have guaranteed the stranger's death. Collapsing into a nearby chair, she breathes a massive, exhausted sigh of pure relief. Examining his elegant clothing, she intensely wonders what kind of wealthy noble house this mysterious man belongs to. Anxiety flares as she desperately prays this encounter won't drag her into some messy aristocratic drama. Nodding obediently, she accepts the doctor's request to keep a close eye on the critically injured patient. Settling beside the quiet bed, she maintains a vigilant watch over the heavily bandaged young man. Leaning in closer, she carefully studies the unconscious stranger's battered but peaceful features. Utterly captivated, she marvels at how incredibly handsome he remains despite his severe, bloody injuries. A sudden, nagging sense of familiarity strikes her as she desperately tries to place his striking face. Rapidly analyzing his noble attire, long tied-up hair, and golden eyes, the puzzle pieces violently snap together. Absolute shock paralyzes her body as the terrifying truth of his identity finally hits her. Vivid images from her past life's favorite otome games suddenly explode across her racing mind. Horrified, she instantly recognizes the injured man as the disguised royal, Hedera. She frantically recalls that Hedera is the first prince of the Balan Empire and the game's most popular love interest. Her mind races back to a specific game scenario where the prince sneaks into the bustling capital for fun. Staring in absolute disbelief, she confirms he is wearing the exact disguise from that famous secret event. Suddenly, the injured prince weakly groans and slowly forces his golden eyes open. Glaring at her with icy contempt, he bitterly demands to know why she didn't just let him die. Completely blindsided by his suicidal resentment, she freezes in utter, speechless shock. A heavy, suffocating silence fills the room as she stares down at the deeply broken prince. Righteous fury violently ignites in her chest as she processes his unbelievably ungrateful words. Lunging forward with explosive anger, she fiercely grabs the startled prince by his pristine collar. Screaming with burning resolve, she viciously reminds him that people are fighting like hell just to survive their cruel fates. Furious at his ungrateful attitude, she boldly scolds the disguised prince for being incredibly rude to his savior. His eyes widen in sheer astonishment, prompting a sudden wave of panic to instantly crash over her racing mind. Frantically waving her hands, she stammers a desperate apology as she brutally remembers his terrifying royal status. Stopping dead in her tracks, a sudden, striking sense of déjà vu completely washes over her nostalgic thoughts. She vividly recalls that Miyabi, her former gang-leading friend, used to speak with this exact same suicidal arrogance. Flashbacks reveal a bloodied Miyabi bitterly confessing he was sick of his boring life and just wanted to die. Smiling fiercely, her past self confidently told the broken boy that failing to die meant he was destined to live. Radiating unshakable strength, she boldly challenged the injured gang leader to fully accept his new reality. With a fearless grin, she forcefully declared it was simply his bad luck that she was the one who found him. Snapping back to the present, she is completely shell-shocked to realize she just repeated those exact words to Hedera. A tense silence stretches across the room as the injured prince stares intensely into her wide, panicked eyes. A soft, genuine smile breaks across his face as he gently agrees that he really was just incredibly unlucky. Utterly paralyzed, she stares in awe as Miyabi's familiar, laughing face perfectly overlaps with the prince's striking features. Snapping out of her nostalgic daze, a massive blush violently explodes across her deeply flustered cheeks. Desperate to escape the heavy tension, she abruptly spins around and loudly announces her immediate departure. Before she can flee, Hedera calls out to her and sincerely expresses his deepest gratitude for saving his life. With striking vulnerability, he confesses that her harsh words successfully reminded him exactly why he wants to keep living. Stunned into absolute silence, she wildly questions if the famously cold prince was actually always this incredibly genuine. Awkwardly accepting his heartfelt thanks, she struggles to maintain her composure under his intense, golden gaze. Sprinting out of the clinic, she violently slams the heavy door shut and flees into the bustling city streets. Racing through the capital, she firmly rationalizes that a talkative prince absolutely does not need her hovering over him. Clutching her racing heart, she desperately prays her hasty escape prevented him from discovering her true identity. Back in the quiet clinic room, Hedera silently stares at the closed door with an intense, calculating gaze. Suddenly, an ominous figure steps from the shadows, sinisterly declaring that they have finally located the missing royal. Hedera's gentle expression instantly shatters, replaced by a terrifyingly cold glare directed at his deadly pursuer. Returning safely to the empty estate, Dahlia excitedly heads out to fully exploit her rare chance for secret training. Sneaking through the quiet corridors, she immediately pauses when she spots the estate's maids secretly whispering together. Eavesdropping from the shadows, she overhears the shocking rumor that the first prince has officially gone missing. Deep confusion clouds her mind as she frantically wonders why Hedera hasn't returned to the capital after a whole week. She mentally maps the dangerous royal succession, noting the fierce rivalry between Hedera and the third prince, Sugri. Despite being the strongest absolute candidate, Hedera critically lost the crucial political backing of his late mother. Dark rumors continually swirl around the suspicious carriage accident that brutally killed the second prince years ago. Seizing the power vacuum, a massive faction of corrupt nobles aggressively threw their support behind the third prince. The current greedy empress and her wicked allies ruthlessly manipulate the crumbling empire to stuff their own pockets. Dahlia grimly realizes her own Marquis Agnes family was supposed to remain strictly neutral in this deadly political war. Leaning in close, a secretive maid fiercely whispers that this conversation must remain strictly between them. She darkly reveals that the treacherous lady of the house might actually be responsible for the first prince's shocking disappearance. Lurking in the shadows, Dahlia's eyes widen in absolute horror as she overhears the terrifying rumor. Another maid confirms the grim truth, claiming she overheard the lady conspiring with a mysterious guest from the capital. Dahlia's mind races frantically as she realizes this conspiracy makes the House of Agnes a direct enemy of Hedera. Dread pools in her stomach as she fears the villainous stepmother might actually assassinate a main character before Dahlia's own doom. Driven by sheer panic, Dahlia furiously swings her heavy sword to violently clear her racing thoughts. Sweat drips from her brow as she aggressively executes a relentless, high-octane flurry of desperate strikes. Panting heavily, she fiercely resolves that they can never level up if the prince tragically dies. Suddenly, her intense training violently halts as she turns toward an unexpected sound. Her breath completely hitches as the supposedly missing Hedera materializes right before her eyes. Flustered by his sudden appearance, she clumsily stammers a greeting and thanks him for their previous encounter. Brushing off his severe injuries, Hedera warmly assures her that he is perfectly fine as long as he doesn't push himself. Deep confusion clouds Dahlia's thoughts as she internally questions why the missing prince hasn't returned to the safety of the palace. Staring at the relaxed royal, she strongly suspects that something incredibly strange is unfolding in the shadows. Hedera's golden eyes widen in genuine surprise as he realizes a noble girl is fiercely practicing swordsmanship. Dahlia visibly flinches, bracing herself for his inevitable mockery over her unladylike combat training. Instantly piercing her defenses, Hedera bluntly asks if she is secretly training to become a knight. Flashing a supportive smile, he boldly declares that gender means absolutely nothing if a warrior possesses true skill. Ignited by his incredible support, Dahlia fiercely vows to prove that even a girl can rise as a legendary knight. Hedera stares silently at her, deeply captivated by the blinding radiance of her unshakable resolve. With a wistful gaze, he softly confesses that her blazing heart heavily reminds him of someone he will never forget. Shattering the quiet tension, he formally introduces himself as Hedera Grady, the first prince of the realm. Dahlia screams internally, violently wishing he hadn't explicitly confirmed the terrifying secret identity she already knew. Ignoring her obvious panic, Hedera intensely scrutinizes her striking silver hair. He deeply analyzes her ruby-red eyes while she nervously stutters out a clumsy attempt at an introduction. A dramatic, heavy silence descends as a fierce gust of wind sweeps violently through the quiet training grounds. Closing the distance with predatory grace, Hedera locks his piercing gaze entirely upon her trembling form. Radiating absolute authority, he smoothly reaches out and firmly captures her delicate hand in his. Smirking slightly, he flawlessly shatters her anonymity by addressing her directly as Lady Dahlia Agnes. Bowing with elegant reverence, the powerful prince sincerely thanks the stunned girl for saving his desperate life. Dahlia gasps in pure shock, completely paralyzed by the royal's unbelievably intimate and polite gesture. Smirking warmly, he reveals they actually met as children and playfully asks if she really thought he had forgotten her. Her brain catastrophically short-circuits as the overwhelming weight of their forgotten childhood connection crashes down upon her. Frozen in sheer disbelief, she can only utter a tiny gasp as their destinies violently intertwine. Calling out firmly, a voice demands Dahlia's attention. Sternly instructing her, the speaker orders her to stay put and behave. Bidding farewell, a younger voice calls her big sis and asks for confirmation. Meekly submitting, Dahlia whispers her agreement. Silence falls as the scene transitions heavily into the environment. Sighing inwardly, Dahlia miserably wishes she could just go home already. Suddenly, a confident voice calls out to grab her attention. Approaching boldly, the man introduces himself as Hedera Grady and accurately identifies her as Lady Dahlia Agnes. Pausing momentarily, Hedera locks his gaze onto her startled form. Shocked by his polite request to talk, Dahlia completely fails to understand why the first prince would approach her. Despite her lingering confusion, her lonely heart begins to waver under his attention. Blushing deeply, she stammers an agreement as he completely steals her heart in a single, breathless moment. Stunned by his sudden offer, Dahlia listens as he smoothly proposes to help her with sword training. Hesitant despite the tempting offer, she questions if it is truly all right for His Highness to avoid returning to the capital. Explaining his delay amid widespread disappearance rumors, Hedera reveals he is staying temporarily while his badly wounded attendant receives treatment. Smirking slightly, he confidently points out that this arrangement benefits her as well. Gazing thoughtfully, the two share a quiet moment of mutual understanding. The atmosphere settles calmly as their new dynamic is firmly established. Time skips forward gracefully, landing securely a few days later. Preparing for intense action, the combatants confidently take their fighting stances. Metal clashes violently against metal as their training swords connect in a blur of motion. Suggesting a brief respite, Hedera receives a polite expression of gratitude from his exhausted pupil. Frustrated by another defeat, Dahlia groans while Hedera genuinely praises her impressive progress. Catching her breath, she looks up admiringly at her royal instructor. Marveling at his immense stamina, she realizes he is not even breaking a sweat. Questioning how someone so incredibly strong could have ever ended up so badly wounded, her curiosity rapidly peaks. Staring darkly, Hedera grimly declares that a person with no will to live is absolutely no different from a corpse. Confused by his dark statement, Dahlia hesitatingly asks him to clarify his meaning. Shutting down her inquiry instantly, he coldly states it is something she does not need to know. Deflated by his sharp rejection, she quietly accepts his firm refusal to elaborate. A heavy, palpable tension hangs awkwardly in the air between them. Suddenly shifting his stance, the prince rapidly closes the physical distance separating them. Startled out of her wandering thoughts, Dahlia gasps in sudden surprise. Heart pounding wildly, she realizes his handsome face is now dangerously close to hers. Lingering in the intimate proximity, the intense moment hangs suspended in breathless anticipation. Plucking debris from her shoulder, Hedera calmly points out the mess. He gently holds up the stray leaf for her to see. Startled by his sudden intimacy, Dahlia quickly steps backward in shock. She stammers out a heavily flustered expression of gratitude. Marveling at his undeniable coolness, she internally swoons over the handsome prince. She briefly allows herself to imagine she is the heroine of a romantic tale. Shifting the topic to the royal knights, Hedera assures her that skill reigns supreme. He confidently declares her current prowess is enough to pass the entrance exam. Offering to secretly pull strings, he casually suggests putting in a good word on her behalf. Horrified by the prospect of nepotism, Dahlia screams out a panicked refusal. Threatening to seriously resent him if he interferes, she firmly stands her ground. She fiercely declares that victory only matters if she earns it completely independently. Absorbing her unyielding independence, Hedera falls utterly quiet. He calmly acknowledges her fiery resolve with a simple, respectful nod. Squirming under his intense observation, Dahlia bitterly curses his oppressive gaze. She shudders as it eerily reminds her of Miyabi's overbearing stares. Suddenly, a tense silence completely shatters the peaceful garden atmosphere. An unexpected presence aggressively storms into their quiet, isolated vicinity. Shouting frantically for His Highness, a desperate newcomer abruptly halts his sprint. His wide eyes lock onto Lady Dahlia in absolute, unbridled disbelief. Turning toward the loud interruption, the prince smoothly acknowledges his arrival. He shows zero surprise at being violently tracked down by his servant. Mocking the man for acting like a loyal dog, Hedera casually dismisses his nighttime disappearances. He taunts the exhausted servant for finally tracking him down. Scrutinizing the newcomer's purple eyes and navy blue hair, Dahlia's breath violently catches. Her racing mind connects the dots to a horrifying, game-altering realization. Scolding the prince about recent assassination attempts, Ajiga is swiftly and sharply reprimanded. Hedera coldly orders his panicked aide to read the room much better. Trembling with sudden dread, Dahlia completely breaks down in mental panic. Her worst suspicions are violently and undeniably confirmed right before her eyes. Recognizing Ajiga from the game, she remembers his incredibly dark narrative purpose. He is the terrifying harbinger of Dahlia's absolutely inescapable death route. Knowing he is Hedera's dangerous personal aide, she vividly recalls his lethal role. Ajiga is the very man who personally executes her in the brutal downfall route. Frozen in sheer terror, a confusing realization suddenly pierces her mounting panic. She violently struggles to connect the present reality with her past game knowledge. Connecting the dots about the injured aide, she violently jolts back to reality. Ajiga abruptly cuts through her spiraling thoughts by aggressively addressing her. Stepping closer with undisguised hostility, the royal aide drops all formal pretenses. Ajiga narrows his dark eyes into a lethal, terrifyingly piercing glare. Demanding if she understands who she is speaking to, he completely corners her. He aggressively questions her very identity and her right to be near the prince. Baffled by his sudden explosion of intensity, Dahlia shrinks rapidly backward. She completely fails to understand the source of his overwhelming, unprovoked hostility. Heavy silence thickens the air as the murderous aide utterly refuses to relent. A palpable tension grips the sprawling garden in a suffocating, lethal chokehold. Shifting away from the present conflict, the narrative violently plunges backward in time. The tense confrontation rapidly dissolves into a haunting, distant memory of the past. Lingering on a quiet moment, a silent observer watches carefully from the dark shadows. The atmosphere shifts dramatically to a melancholic reflection on deeply lost days. Reflecting on his master's currently cold demeanor, Ajiga ponders a deeply tragic truth. He melancholically wonders when the burdened prince last looked genuinely and freely happy. Remembering the prince from exactly 10 years ago, he vividly recalls a brighter era. The young royal possessed a pure innocence wholly unsuited for his heavy position. Bursting with youthful energy, a young hetera dashes excitedly toward the blooming garden. A frantic, younger Ajiga desperately begs for royal restraint from trailing behind. Stopping the energetic young prince dead in his tracks, an imposing adult figure appears. The commanding presence demands His Highness's immediate and absolute undivided attention. Bowing with practiced elegance, Marquis Scabiosa Agnes formally introduces his esteemed self. He warmly greets the young prince after a noticeably long absence from court. Mentioning his similarly aged daughter, the Marquis smoothly proposes a royal introduction. He suggests a formal meeting at the highly anticipated upcoming tea party. Smiling with pure, untainted warmth, the bright young hetera eagerly accepts the offer. He happily agrees to converse with the nobleman's mysterious young daughter. Uttering the name that will alter destiny, the Marquis proudly makes his revelation. He brightly announces that his beloved young daughter is proudly named Dahlia. Describing her silver hair and ruby eyes, he paints a breathtakingly vivid picture. He melancholically notes her striking and beautiful resemblance to his deeply missed late wife. Captivated by the vivid description, the young prince happily envisions the magical girl. He excitedly imagines the beautiful Dahlia flashing her iconic silver hair and ruby eyes. Calling out desperately, Ajiga repeatedly demands His Highness's attention. Silence hangs heavily as the weight of the fleeting moment fully settles over the desolate scene. Reflecting on the past, Ajiga misses the old prince but feels a deep pride as he steps closer to becoming a true emperor. Haunted by memory, he vividly recalls the chilling moment the young royal transformed into a cold, unrecognizable stranger. Breaking the tense silence, a concerned voice gently asks if something is deeply troubling the distant prince. Remembering a stark anomaly, Ajiga recalls how genuinely excited His Highness seemed about meeting Lady Dahlia at the tea party. Crushed by dark reality, the loyal aide bitterly admits that his hopeful assumptions were entirely wrong. Following that fateful day, the shattered prince began aimlessly drifting through life with absolute apathy. Shifting his focus, a sudden realization violently interrupts Ajiga's grim recollections. A heavy atmosphere immediately grips the silent, sprawling garden once more as memories fade. Marveling at the prince's recent demeanor, Ajiga realizes how incredibly focused and alive hetera looked alongside Dahlia. Analyzing this striking change, the aide confidently concludes that Dahlia is undeniably having a profound effect on the royal. Transitioning away from the garden, the narrative focus shifts entirely to a new, urgent development. Shocked by a sudden discovery, Dahlia loudly realizes the night trials are being held all the way in the capital. Pausing abruptly, her racing mind immediately begins calculating the logistical hurdles of this daunting journey. Considering the vast distance to the capital, she determines she must urgently arrange a secure carriage. Startling her out of her deep thoughts, the head butler smoothly interrupts with a polite pardon. Explaining the assigned maid's sudden illness, he calmly announces he has come to assist in her place. Hesitating with inward doubt, Dahlia nervously debates whether she can truly trust this supposed ally with her massive secret. Catching her entirely off guard, the butler directly questions her hidden desire to join the royal knights. Admitting her bold intentions, she defensively asks if the senior servant plans to forcefully stop her. Shocking her entirely, the butler dismisses the idea of stopping her and earnestly begs to assist. Stunned into absolute silence, Dahlia stares at the unexpected ally in sheer, open-mouthed disbelief. Confirming his total dedication, he promises to secretly arrange her escape carriage as she questions his dangerous resolve. Fearing for his safety, she anxiously warns that her cruel stepmother will severely punish him if he is caught helping. Confessing his deep remorse, the butler firmly states he refuses to live with any more regrets for never aiding her. Overwhelmed by his unexpected loyalty, raw emotion visibly strikes the young noblewoman. Expressing her profound gratitude, she listens as he carefully outlines the carriage rendezvous set for 3 days from now. Comforting the remorseful servant, Dahlia gently absolves him of guilt by blaming her parents' oppressive pressure. Growing solemnly serious, the head butler hesitates before asking Lady Dahlia to listen to his crucial words. Locking eyes with the young master, he heavily asks if she truly resents her father. The shocking question instantly hangs in the air, creating a dense cloud of profound emotional tension. Retracting his previous silence, the butler openly admits that her father had undeniably changed over the painful years. Dispelling her long-held assumptions, he fiercely insists that the master never pressured him and genuinely loved his daughter. Utterly bewildered by this sudden emotional revelation, Dahlia desperately wonders why he is telling her this heavy truth now. Acknowledging the convenience of his words, the head butler sincerely reveals that the master has always kept Lady Dahlia warmly in his thoughts. Observing his genuine expression, Dahlia silently concludes that the loyal head butler does not appear to be lying about her father's hidden feelings. Hesitating to believe the sudden revelation, she graciously thanks him for sharing the unexpected truth. Realizing the profound impact of this revelation, she thoughtfully notes that the original Dahlia would have been utterly overjoyed by this truth. Reflecting on a tragic past, she deeply remembers how the original Dahlia desperately craved her family's love until the very bitter end. Fast-forwarding through time, 3 days quickly vanish as the fateful escape plan finally approaches. Glancing cautiously around the quiet estate, Dahlia carefully navigates the moonlit grounds to secure her secret escape. Stepping swiftly through the shadows, she boldly advances toward her planned rendezvous point. Shattering the quiet night, a harsh voice suddenly demands to know what Dahlia thinks she is doing out here. Glaring with deep contempt, her stepmother viciously insults Dahlia's attire and angrily questions her utter lack of shame. Pausing dead in her tracks, Dahlia coldly acknowledges her cruel stepmother's sudden and deeply unwelcome appearance. Demanding immediate obedience, the wicked woman ruthlessly orders Dahlia back to her room for a severe punishment. Defying her stepmother with newfound strength, Dahlia firmly states she has absolutely nothing left to say. Stunned by this unprecedented defiance, the arrogant stepmother freezes in absolute, wide-eyed shock. Unleashing years of suppressed anger, Dahlia fiercely declares her independence and coldly calls out her stepmother's utter lack of maternal care. Scoffing at the pathetic dynamic, Dahlia fiercely questions why she should ever blindly obey such a toxic woman again. Trembling with explosive rage, the stepmother violently cedes at the girl's brazen and completely unforgivable disrespect. Snapping completely, the furious woman aggressively raises her hand to ruthlessly strike the defiant young noble. Blocking the physical attack with cold precision, Dahlia icily reminds the woman she never once asked to be raised by her. Screeching in maniacal fury, the stepmother desperately demands gratitude for raising the allegedly ungrateful brat this far. Forcing the older woman back with intimidating resolve, Dahlia easily overpowers her startled abuser. Screaming wildly for the guards to lock the brat in the dungeon, the stepmother is abruptly interrupted by the commanding voice of Dahlia's father. Pivoting desperately, the panicked stepmother immediately cries out to her imposing husband for authoritative backup. Bracing for the worst, Dahlia violently tenses as she prepares for an explosive confrontation with her stern father. Sobbing with fake tears, the manipulative stepmother falsely accuses Dahlia of repaying years of maternal love with vicious betrayal. Cutting sharply through the hysterical lies, the commanding patriarch firmly calls out his daughter's name. Delivering a shocking decree, he strictly orders Dahlia to leave the family estate immediately for the time being. Gasping in pure astonishment, Dahlia completely freezes at her father's incredibly unexpected banishment. Instructing her swiftly, the father commands her to follow the head butler who will carefully handle all of her travel arrangements. Reeling from the sudden turn of events, Dahlia fiercely struggles to process the overwhelming shift in her destiny. Questioning her father's bizarrely helpful actions, Dahlia silently plots to make a desperate run for it when the perfect moment arises. Sensing her extreme anxiety, her father calmly advises the young noblewoman not to be so incredibly tense. Revealing his total awareness of the situation, he surprisingly confirms he knows all about her secret desire to reach the capital. Connecting the shocking dots, Dahlia frantically realizes the head butler has been loyally working with her father this entire time. Demanding to know if he plans to lock her up, Dahlia boldly faces her father, who calmly counters by asking if imprisonment would ever truly stop her from becoming a knight. Dahlia firmly vows to reach the capital no matter what, as her father silently acknowledges her unyielding resolve. Conceding to her fierce determination, he calmly states that there is absolutely no need to stop her now. Stunned by his completely unexpected shift in demeanor, Dahlia gasps in pure, wide-eyed shock. Exploding with suppressed rage, she fiercely warns him not to act like a caring father after painfully ignoring her for so long. A heavy, palpable silence instantly blankets the tense standoff as the patriarch absorbs her entirely justified fury. Simply and quietly, he accepts her scathing emotional rebuke with a single, solemn word of agreement. Acknowledging her deep, lingering pain, he calmly admits that her harsh accusations are entirely correct. Gesturing toward her escape route, he instructs her to leave immediately as the loyal head butler is waiting. The immense gravity of the moment hangs thickly in the quiet air as their fractured relationship reaches a pivotal crossroads. Clicking her tongue in sharp frustration, Dahlia glares fiercely at the complicated, stoic man standing before her. Reluctantly accepting his unexpected assistance, she quietly agrees to follow his urgent travel instructions. Preparing to depart into the night, she turns her back on her father and finally begins her long journey to the capital. Pausing briefly before leaving completely, Dahlia glances over her shoulder to deliver one final, heavy statement. Offering a parting gift of crucial advice, she coldly asks if he truly intends to leave his wicked wife completely unchecked. Suspecting her stepmother orchestrated the assassination attempt on Yandere, Dahlia urgently warns her father of the looming danger. Bidding her a final farewell, he stoically instructs his estranged daughter to take careful care of herself on the road. The secured carriage rolls steadily away from the Agnes estate, leaving the heavy burdens of her dark past far behind. Staring blankly out the moving window, Dahlia quietly agrees with his final, unexpectedly solemn farewell. Exhausted by the monotonous journey, she bitterly notes that spending all day bouncing in a carriage is incredibly stressful. Suddenly, a violent jolt aggressively rocks the carriage and immediately shatters the peaceful, boring silence. Shrieking in sudden alarm, Dahlia frantically wonders what just violently struck their moving transport. Peering outside in absolute horror, she realizes they are being violently ambushed by a mob of armed bandits. Shocked by the dangerous cliché, she wildly questions how literal bandits actually exist in this fantasy world too. Spotting her iconic silver hair and red eyes, the ruthless attackers excitedly confirm she is their intended assassination target. Drawing her weapon with an intimidating smirk, Dahlia confidently steps out of the carriage to confront the deadly ambush. Thrilled to finally have a proper fight, she fiercely warns the terrified bandits to quickly prepare for death. Unleashing her overwhelming combat power, she aggressively lunges into the chaotic fray with blinding speed. Standing victorious over a beaten, bleeding thug, she coldly demands to know exactly who sent them to kill her. Trembling in sheer terror, the bruised bandit desperately confesses they were merely paid to kill her and know absolutely nothing else. Frustrated by the dead end, she sighs deeply as the true identity of their cowardly employer remains a complete mystery. Stepping out smoothly from the dark shadows, a familiar voice amusedly notes that she really went all out on her attackers. Smiling warmly under the pale moonlight, Prince Yandere casually wishes the blood-splattered Lady Dahlia a good evening. Shocked by his sudden, impossible appearance, Dahlia frantically demands to know what His Highness is doing out here. Astonished by her brutal combat prowess, Yandere marvels that she took out all the bandits entirely by herself without royal knights. Smirking at the surrounding carnage, the prince amusedly admits that his deep worries about her safe travel were clearly completely unfounded. Dahlia gasps in sheer confusion as the unexpected confrontation violently interrupts her racing thoughts. Ominous shadows loom as mysterious, armed figures rapidly surround the tense duo in the dense forest. Realizing her easy departure was a calculated trap, she stammers in shock that these mercenaries have been tracking her this entire time. Furious at the sudden ambush, Prince Yandere glares at the assailants and fiercely demands their true identity. A booming voice suddenly echoes across the field, commanding the dangerous strangers to immediately step away from Lady Dahlia. The arriving commander barks a strict, unyielding order for the threatening men to lower their drawn swords. The leader aggressively reveals that the young man standing before them is none other than His Highness, Prince Yandere. He sternly warns the trembling guards that they are currently threatening the first prince of the entire country. Stricken with absolute terror, the armed men instantly drop to their knees and sincerely scream their apologies. Yandere crosses his arms and coldly prepares to assess the chaotic, shifting situation. Yandere confirms with the kneeling guards that the Marquis actively dispatched them to protect Lady Dahlia. Dahlia eyes them suspiciously, wondering why her treacherous stepmother would send guards after already dispatching ruthless bandits to assassinate her. She anxiously questions her father's recent motives and worries whether he is secretly collaborating with that wicked woman. Yandere calmly reassures her that, at the very least, the Marquis does not appear to actively oppose her current actions. Looking up with a desperate glimmer of hope, Dahlia softly asks the prince if he truly believes her father is on her side. Yandere gazes back at her with a gentle, steadfast expression that silently promises her absolute safety. Suddenly, Hetera's sharp eyes catch sight of an alarming anomaly on her fragile form. Reaching out with visible concern, the prince firmly points out that she has been injured. When he angrily asks if the arriving guards hurt her, she frantically waves her hands and vigorously denies their involvement. His expression darkens instantly as he intensely demands to know who inflicted the vicious wound. Dahlia nervously brushes off the injury to claim she is perfectly fine, while Hetera resolves to immediately escort her to the capital. She hesitates in quiet confusion, entirely unsure of how they will rapidly traverse the long distance together. A majestic, powerful horse is swiftly brought forward to carry them across the sprawling kingdom. Hetera effortlessly mounts the noble steed and casually invites a bewildered Dahlia to ride alongside him. She nervously declines due to her absolute lack of riding experience, but he stubbornly insists that letting her travel alone remains far too risky. Given the difficult choice, she awkwardly selects to ride in the back to avoid the sheer embarrassment of sitting in front of the prince. Hetera chuckles warmly and warns his companion that sitting in the back is actually significantly more dangerous. As she lets out a startled squeak, the prince firmly instructs her to wrap her arms tight around his waist. Blushing furiously, Dahlia suddenly realizes she is directly living out a classic, romantic horse riding scene straight from her favorite otome game. With a powerful, decisive kick, Hetera urges the horse forward and they blast off into the roaring wind. The majestic beast gallops fiercely, rapidly devouring the miles across the breathtaking, open landscape. Hetera glances over his broad shoulder, smiling brightly as he asks if the thrilling ride feels amazing. He graciously accepts her praise and compliments her steady balance, noting she is handling the intense ride surprisingly well for a beginner. She smiles softly into the rushing wind, openly admitting that while the fast-paced ride is tricky, she is finally getting the hang of it. Pressing against him, Dahlia warmly realizes she isn't scared at all because Hetera's broad, sturdy back makes her feel incredibly safe. Dahlia suddenly recalls a fleeting, nostalgic memory from her past life while riding on the galloping horse. She fondly remembers a thrilling moment when she previously rode on the back of Miyabi's speeding motorcycle. Her racing thoughts drift to the unknown fate of her own bike before a startling, dark realization hits her. She nervously confronts the unsettling, long-avoided possibility that she actually died in her previous world. A soft, unexpected chuckle suddenly escapes from Prince Hetera as the wind rushes past them. He quietly murmurs his immense relief and happiness that they finally get to ride together again. Startled by his strange phrasing, Dahlia mutters in sheer confusion at his use of the word, again. Before she can interrogate him, Hetera abruptly interrupts and urgently warns her to be careful. The majestic horse leaps powerfully over the rugged terrain as the pair continues their rapid journey. She decides to push her creeping doubts aside and firmly focus on the comforting feel of Hetera's sturdy back. Dahlia marvels in absolute awe at the bustling, vibrant sights of the massive imperial capital. She eagerly eyes the delicious shops while stubbornly bickering about being treated like a helpless little child. Her roaming attention is suddenly captivated by a striking, colorful display in a nearby store window. She stops and stares in absolute wonder at the array of beautiful, shining treats laid out before her. Despite desperately craving the cute confection, she hesitates because she feels it clashes with her usual fierce image. She briefly pauses to ponder exactly what the original Lady Dahlia would arrogantly demand in this moment. A sudden wave of clarity washes over her as she firmly remembers she currently inhabits Dahlia's beautiful body. Fully embracing her sweet tooth, she confidently orders the adorable dessert from the cheerful vendor. She takes a delighted, eager bite, instantly savoring the rich and sugary flavor melting on her tongue. Hetera silently watches her eat with an intensely focused, utterly unreadable expression shadowing his face. Flustered by his piercing stare, Dahlia gently questions the prince to break the heavy silence. Without a single word, Hetera suddenly reaches out and boldly pulls her trembling body closer to his. He confidently leans in and intimately eats a stray, lingering crumb directly off her shocked face. The prince hums in quiet, undeniable satisfaction after boldly stealing a taste of her sweet dessert. Deeply flushed by the intimate contact, Dahlia frantically wonders if the prince is always this excessively touchy-feely. She quickly calms her racing heart by rationalizing that this behavior is practically adorable compared to Miyabi's past antics. Hetera casually licks his lips and smoothly remarks that the stolen treat is surprisingly sweet. Trapped by his intense, unyielding eye contact, Dahlia nervously stammers her frantic agreement. Despite the light-hearted romantic tension, A nagging suspicion takes root that something is definitely wrong about Hedera. She reminds herself that since Dahlia was a notorious villainess, the prince possesses absolutely no logical reason to treat her so kindly. When Hedera warmly asks if something is wrong, she waves her hands and frantically denies her inner turmoil. She intensely analyzes his familiar face, deeply troubled by the unexplainable, creeping differences from his original game persona. They carefully weave their way through a loud, bustling crowd as they finally arrive at their crowded destination. A booming, authoritative voice suddenly cuts through the dense chatter, aggressively calling for the next person in line. An attendant firmly directs them toward the spectator seating, abruptly setting the stage for an intense, impending event. Stepping boldly into the grand courtyard, a determined applicant prepares to face her ultimate destiny. Announcing her unyielding purpose, Dahlia confidently declares her intent to take the grueling knight's entrance exam. A stunned receptionist points toward the exam hall while staring at the young noblewoman in absolute, wide-eyed disbelief. Mocking murmurs ripple through the harsh crowd as onlookers question how a girl with such skinny arms could possibly survive the test. Ignoring their bitter whispers, Dahlia silently wonders if a female applicant is truly such a bizarre, unbelievable sight. The crowd's attention violently shifts toward a heavily hyped young man who is practically guaranteed to pass. Spotting the prominent figure, Dahlia immediately acknowledges his undeniable, commanding presence in the bustling courtyard. Observing his hardened demeanor, she assumes the mysterious boy must have endured tremendous, unspoken hardships. Absolute shock strikes her core as she suddenly recognizes the brooding young man as Shiran. Glaring with icy intensity, Shiran bluntly demands to know if she needs something from him. Flustered by her sudden realization, she rapidly stammers a quick apology and defensively backs away. She mentally recalls that Shiran is the Duke's second son and a prominent romance option from her past life's Otome game. Thrilled by his physical presence, she fondly remembers admiring his relentless, pressure-filled climb to Knight Commander in the original story. Stepping forward with newfound courage, she introduces herself as Dahlia Agnes and internally vows to become his ultimate rival. Completely unfazed by her passionate introduction, Shiran coldly advises her to stay far away from him. Turning his broad back, the notoriously icy knight dismisses the stunned girl without a single second thought. Watching his retreating figure, Dahlia simply reminds herself that Shiran has always been the famously aloof type. Frustrated by the rampant prejudice, she fiercely questions if a woman desiring true knighthood is actually so impossible. Gathering her burning resolve, she firmly reminds herself that absolutely no official rule bars women from taking the exam. Clenching her fists with iron determination, she completely commits to leaving her comfortable noble family name behind. Fueling her rising excitement, she channels the strength of neighboring female knights and eagerly prepares to showcase her raw skill. A confident, wicked smirk graces her lips as she vividly envisions blowing away every single doubter in the arena. Radiating an intense, unstoppable fighting spirit, Dahlia fully immerses herself in the zone for the impending brutal trials. Her heart pounds like a war drum in her chest as the massive, life-altering entrance exam officially commences. Surging with unyielding momentum, she mentally screams her absolute, unbreakable vow to pass the grueling test. Triumphant success finally arrives in the physical form of a hard-earned, glorious certificate of admission. Smiling at her brilliant victory, she gratefully credits her survival to the brutal prior training she endured with Prince Hedera. Despite her massive achievement, she humbly acknowledges that Shiran's terrifying raw skill exists on an entirely different level. Just as she fiercely resolves to grow even stronger, a familiar voice suddenly interrupts her hyper-focused thoughts. Spinning around in sheer surprise, Dahlia gasps as the usually distant Lord Shiran unexpectedly approaches her. Shiran unexpectedly expresses gentle concern, asking if she is managing all right while staying at a lonely public inn. Grateful for his surprising kindness, she confidently assures him that she is completely fine despite a few minor inconveniences. A heavy, highly charged silence falls between the two newly minted knights as Shiran intensely studies her face. Shattering the thick tension, Shiran extends a shocking, unprecedented invitation for her to come away with him. Utterly bewildered by the aloof boy's sudden offer, Dahlia freezes in absolute wide-eyed shock. Shiran graciously invites Dahlia to stay at the Mardell estate until the induction ceremony so she can move freely. Taken aback by the generous offer, Dahlia nervously questions if her prolonged presence will become a heavy burden. Shiran dismisses her worries entirely and vaguely hints that she will actually be the one surprised by the stay. Tilting her head in sheer confusion, she silently ponders what the aloof knight meant by being surprised. Nodding with newfound resolve, Dahlia graciously accepts his invitation and officially places herself in his care. Looking up at her stoic companion, she softly murmurs Shiran's name under her breath. A bright smile breaks across her face as she eagerly suggests sparring with him during her upcoming stay. Pausing his steady stride, Shiran turns slightly and prompts the aspiring knight to continue speaking. The cool-headed young man casually requests that she drop all formalities and simply call him by his first name. Shiran casts a calm, striking glance backward that perfectly captures his notoriously unbothered demeanor. Readily agreeing to his request, she cheerfully insists that he feel absolutely free to call her Dahlia in return. Shiran bluntly replies that he will only use her first name if the right opportunity naturally arises. Noting the growing crowd surrounding them, the stoic knight decisively commands that they leave the area at once. Following closely behind, Dahlia fondly realizes that this exact bluntness forms the awkward charm that makes girls swoon. The dynamic pair smoothly departs from the bustling exam grounds to begin their journey toward his noble family's home. Arriving at their destination, Dahlia gapes in absolute awe at the massive Mardell estate that completely dwarfs her own home. A polite voice suddenly shatters her amazement as a refined servant steps forward to formally address Lady Dahlia. Shiran swiftly excuses himself from the grand foyer and firmly leaves the rest of her care to the capable staff. The attentive maid introduces herself as a servant of Lady Rose Mardell and requests an immediate, private meeting. A jolt of pure shock electrifies Dahlia's spine as she internally repeats the ominous name of Rose Mardell. Frantic recognition flashes across her eyes as she suddenly remembers the dark, twisted significance of that specific character. She nervously recalls that Shiran's obsessively protective older sister, Rose, serves as the terrifying Villainess of his romantic route. A grimace of absolute dread contorts her features as she mentally braces herself for the impending villainous encounter. Sweating profusely, Dahlia realizes she never actually expected to face the notorious game antagonist in person. Stepping through the heavy doors, Dahlia marvels that the extravagantly dark room perfectly matches a classic Villainess's aesthetic. A sharp, commanding cough instantly and violently snaps Dahlia's wandering attention back to the center of the opulent room. Reclining haughtily on her lavish seating, the imposing Lady Rose Mardell coldly demands her startled guest's identity. Swallowing her mounting fear, Dahlia executes a flawless curtsy and formally introduces herself as Dahlia Agnes. Rose's piercing eyes viciously scan Dahlia from head to toe in a tense, unbroken, and highly judgmental silence. Delivering her biting verdict, Rose haughtily declares that the young knight's physical appearance is merely passable. Dahlia violently suppresses a twitch of sheer indignation at the unbelievable insult hurled at her undeniably gorgeous face. Shifting the brutal interrogation, Rose aggressively questions whether Dahlia is genuinely attempting to become a royal knight. The Villainess glares down at the aspiring warrior with an icy expression overflowing with pure, unfiltered disdain. Striking a venomous verbal blow, Rose loudly proclaims that such violent ambitions are absolutely shameful for a noble lady. A heavy, suffocating tension crashes over the luxurious room as the ruthless Villainess firmly draws her initial battle lines. Haughtily asserting her dominance, Lady Rose coldly commands Dahlia to show some respect and pick up the dropped item. Furious at the sudden blatant disrespect, Dahlia mentally curses the arrogant noblewoman for believing she can easily push her around. Without breaking eye contact, Dahlia calmly and deliberately drops her own item right beside Rose's. The metallic object clatters loudly against the polished floor as the thick tension in the room instantly escalates. Dahlia mockingly apologizes for dropping her belongings and sharply suggests it would be faster if Rose picked it up herself. Rose's confident and haughty demeanor instantly shatters as pure, unadulterated shock washes over her pale face. Trembling with unbridled rage, the arrogant Villainess stammers in absolute disbelief at the sheer audacity of her guest. Dahlia firmly reminds her that royal knights operate strictly on merit, calling Rose's elitist comment an absolute insult to the throne. Enraged by the bold defiance, Rose fiercely orders Dahlia to get out and screams about being horribly insulted in her own home. Completely unfazed by the explosive outburst, Dahlia fiercely challenges the furious girl by asking what is so inherently wrong with a female knight. She sharply criticizes the suffocating and empty lifestyle of noblewomen who spend their entire lives pandering to men inside gilded cages. When Rose mockingly asks if she fears never receiving a proper marriage offer, Dahlia remains resolute and entirely unshaken. Staring down the stunned aristocrat, Dahlia fiercely and loudly proclaims her ultimate, unbreakable desire to live freely. An intense and heavy silence violently crashes over the lavish room as the two strong-willed women lock eyes. Breaking the suffocating tension, Rose clicks her tongue sharply while processing the immense weight of the heated confrontation. Dahlia quickly notices a sudden, undeniable shift in Rose's entire intimidating and highly hostile vibe. Letting out a short breath, Rose mutters how absolutely unbelievable the absurd situation has rapidly become. Shiran suddenly bursts through the heavy double doors to urgently interrupt the rapidly escalating conflict. Sprinting into the room, he urgently shouts Dahlia's name as he desperately attempts to assess the highly volatile scene. Rose instantly drops her terrifying hostile facade and practically leaps across the room toward her beloved brother. Embracing him tightly, she completely ignores his frantic scolding and obsessively gushes over how cool and adorable he looks. Ignoring his sister's overwhelming and suffocating affection, Shiran immediately demands to know if she harmed Dahlia. Dahlia watches the bizarre spectacle in pure shock, internally realizing that Rose's extreme brother complex hits entirely differently in real life. Pouting defensively, Rose firmly insists she did absolutely nothing to hurt the aspiring female knight. Breaking away from her brother slightly, the formerly hostile Villainess dramatically rolls her eyes at the absurd accusations. Surprising everyone in the room, Rose bluntly admits she genuinely respects Dahlia's incredible guts for bravely talking back. Dahlia stands completely frozen in absolute bewilderment as the predictable narrative aggressively goes completely off the rails. Shiran sighs deeply while mentally struggling to process his older sister's highly erratic and entirely unpredictable behavior. Later in the quiet halls, Shiran sincerely apologizes for his sister crossing the line, though Dahlia quickly assures him everything is fine. Catching his striking gaze, Dahlia softly brings up a highly surprising and delightful detail from the chaotic earlier encounter. She cheerfully points out with a bright smile that he finally called her by her first name. Shiran flinches visibly as a massive wave of sudden embarrassment violently crashes over him. Smiling warmly, Dahlia genuinely confesses that hearing him bravely say her name made her feel significantly closer to him. Severely flustered, Shiran defensively asks if his accidental slip of the tongue was a problem, which she immediately denies. Overwhelmed by her sudden earnest affection, the usually aloof and untouchable knight lets out a highly flustered gasp. He sharply turns his intensely blushing face away and gruffly grumbles that she is being far too embarrassing. A heavy, romantically charged silence wraps warmly around the two highly flustered knights as they stand close together. Dahlia gently grabs his thick sleeve to bravely keep him from retreating further into his protective emotional shell. Her heart unexpectedly pounds violently in her chest as she gazes affectionately up at his vividly blushing face. Shiran finally lets out a soft, totally defeated chuckle as the remaining awkward tension completely melts between them.